Well, good evening. It is wonderful to be with you all. When I'm introduced as the 70th Secretary of State, it always reminds me that Donald Trump was the 45th president, so there was a lot more turnover in my gig than his, and that I would every morning check my cell phone, check Twitter, make sure I still had a job, and then get on to the important tasks of the day. Jeff, thank you for inviting me here. Thanks for the kind introduction. Jeff left out my most important accomplishment. My wife and I, Susan, taught fifth grade Sunday school, which was the best preparation for being America's Secretary of State you can possibly imagine. If you can keep fifth grade boys in your seat, there is no chance Chairman Kim's going to run the table on you. None. I read through the list of previous recipients. It's an honor to be receiving this award as we come up on the 40th anniversary of this special place. Indeed, on this night, we dedicated ourselves to the late John Ashbrook, just as President Reagan did, standing here. When I was a young cadet many years ago at West Point, Ronald Reagan was my first commander-in-chief. I was incredibly blessed to have him as my boss. President Reagan, along with great conservative champions like Congressman Ashbrook, came to define my understanding, my conception, and that of my entire class from 1986 of what it means to truly be an American. The central thesis of how one creates peace through wisdom and strength, the central notion of trust but verify, the fact that we are, in fact, a shining city on the hill, all came from these men. And these words and many more became guiding lights for me and so many from my generation, those of us who came to love our country. I finished my book a couple months ago. Its title is Never Give an Inch, but the subtitle is Fighting for a Country and America That I Love. And that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the America that I love. I want to begin tonight by turning back to something President Reagan, in fact, said on May 9th, 1983, when he was here. He said that opposition to the cult of state power is deeply and irrevocably part of America's past. And the principle of limited government is America's greatest contribution to the constitutional and political history. It was true in 1983. And we are deeply in need of this wisdom today. It's the wisdom of our founding. When I lost my mind and ran for Congress in 2010, I could see that America was coming unmoored from this central idea. I had learned it a long time ago. I met someone tonight whose grandson is in the class of 2026 at West Point. I felt really old. When I got to West Point as part of my orientation as a young cadet, I was given a weapon, some uniforms, and a copy of the Federalist Papers. I still have that exact copy in my possession. It's a little yellowed, a little torn, cover's worn a bit, but the wisdom of that document, those pages, remains as timeless as ever, and I turn to it often. I turned to it when I was CI Director and Secretary of State as well. My son would tell you that it's about all I read beside the Bible. And that's not true. I love the sports page of the LA Times too, but that's the only part of the LA Times I can tolerate. What I thought I'd share with you today is a little bit about how how this center, this important place, thinks about the wisdom of our founding and the importance of teaching it, just as this great teacher spoke to. You can see what's happening in our schools across America. We know that the greatest inheritance we pass down is to train them in American history, the greatness, the exceptional nature of our country. And every one of us can see that what the Ashbrook Center is doing is fighting against an enormous assault on that very idea. We shouldn't shy away from this. I told you the book title is Never Give an Inch, on the things that matter, like teaching our kids about the greatness of our founding. We cannot give an inch. I want to be really clear. The wisdom of our founding is under assault because our Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Federalist Papers, these ideas are told to our students to no longer be applicable today. It's under attack because the places where we teach these things have deteriorated. I get asked all the time, what's the greatest threat to America? Is it Xi Jinping? Is it Chairman Kim? Is it the Taliban? Is it Vladimir Putin? They are all bad. But the greatest risk to America is, frankly, Randy Weingarten. right? The teachers' unions did so much destruction to our young people, and places like this can counter it. There are so many things I could talk to you about, and I'm going to be brief enough that we can have a good conversation, and I'll take as many of your questions as we can get to. This is not a night for politics. I could mention that the Biden administration wants to impose its vaccine mandate on children by requiring public school attendance, but that'd be viewed as political. The truth is it's just unscientific and dangerous. I could mention the lockdowns that the teachers' union imposed long after we knew that COVID posed no serious threat to our kids. But that might be viewed as political. The truth is it's just dangerous. The children who lost 2 years were the children least capable of losing that time with teachers and with their peers. Some of you would have seen the data from this last week. It is going to pour in, because I can tell you the anecdotes I hear from parents as I have crisscrossed the country these last 20 minutes. It's harmed our children's learning, and they are less likely to love this America because of what America failed to do for them. I have to say there is a bit of a silver lining. I find nothing good about the COVID-19, the Wuhan virus, except for this. It gave parents a look inside the black box at exactly what it was we were teaching our kids. When school moved from the classroom to the living room, you all, parents all across America, got a chance, front row seat, to see what the kids were being taught. What'd they see? They saw the children being lectured about race and so-called gender identity. And by the way, thank you for getting my pronouns right, Jeff. I appreciate that. You know, they saw, too, that their children were being taught that America's founding act happened in 1619. That's not what Mrs. Sirota taught me. Mrs. Sirota had it right. We know that the men who wrote our Declaration of Independence did so at enormous risk to their own lives. And they did so because they wanted a nation that was unique in all of civilization. Our kids have been taught different from that. They've been taught that the history of America was one marked by racism and power struggles between different groups of identity or class. This kind of history is Marxism with a new coat of paint. But what we know for sure is not American history. It is not the American civic tradition. Whether you call it wokeness or critical race theory or call it whatever you may, misguidedness, these ideas have no place in our children's classrooms. And bless you for helping teachers understand that. The good Lord will reward you for that. You know, I talked about the Federalist Papers. There's nothing in there about our country being racist. I went to 140 some odd countries as CI Director and Secretary of State. We may well be the least racist nation in the world. For me, I observe this and I watch what's being taught to our children as teaching them to hate the idea of America. The timeless traditions of our nation's founding are being replaced with this Marxist dogma. We can't let it happen. They paint a dark vision of America where the state is the provider and ultimate moral authority. But as my friend Rebeccah spoke to, we know who the moral authority is. We know the Judeo-Christian traditions of this great nation. We know that our rights didn't come from me when I was a member of Congress or your great state elected officials. They came from our Creator. And we should never teach our children anything different from that. We busted away from tyranny. We should teach our kids that. We preserved through a terrible civil war to end an abomination, slavery here in our country. And we twice defended the world from ruthless dictators, fascists, communists. That place, the place that placed the first man on the moon and withstood the greatest domestic terror attack our nation has ever known, is a great America. It's the America that I had the privilege to serve as your Secretary of State. Those 140 some odd countries I went to, I never apologized once. When we got it wrong, I didn't defend it. I said, gosh, we got it wrong. We're going to go fix it. And we'll use all of America's power to be a force for good in the world. We do this in so many ways. I could count them to you. It starts in the classroom. We have to ensure each generation is raised with this idea. I've spoken about that. We have to continue to empower our parents to make sure they get to oversee what it is their children are being taught. They aren't creatures of the state. They are our makers' creatures, and parents have the responsibility to make sure our children know that and have an opportunity to learn that. You can see what happens when children get a chance to see inside that black box. They got involved by never before. I was in Franklin County, Tennessee. It's been a couple of months ago. A fella comes up to me, black biker jacket, Harley Davidson patch, do-rag. I would put him at about 70 years old. He says, Mike, I love you. And of course, what's the correct answer? I love you too, sir. He said, you'll never guess, but I'm going to run for school board. And he said, I don't even know where they hold the meetings, but I'm going to win. He was very honest. He said, I don't like what they're teaching my grandkids. He said he went to a PTA meeting for the first time in his life. I wish I could have seen that. But I've now helped candidates all across America who are running for school board. Even in my home, USD 259, the school district for South Central Kansas, for Wichita, our biggest city. Back home, we had a school board that had lost its way. We replaced 3 of the 5. We should make sure and hold them accountable too, just as you're going to do all throughout Ohio. I'm confident of that. These ideas are broken ideas that they wanted to teach our kids. We should teach them just like the Ashbrook Center does and is doing tremendous work on all across the country. We should teach them the things that work, the things that fix America and make it great. We know that freedom is only a generation away. That's what my former commander-in-chief taught us. We should teach the things that matter. You all tonight have been an inspiration to me. I'm always reminded that I raised my hand to defend the Constitution 7 times, first as a soldier, young lieutenant, then as a captain, then a handful of times when I was elected in Congress, and then twice serving you in the executive branch. It was always so deeply humbling. I'll never forget, I was with my son and my wife, Susan. We were walking down the hallway of the 7th floor of your State Department. 7th floor of State Department is occupied by a couple things. One, a group of people who didn't think so much of President Trump and me, because we were a pretty unique administration. No, you can laugh there. We were unique, though. I mean, look, I ran a machine shop in Wichita, Kansas. There will not be another Secretary of State who ever ran a machine shop. Write it down. But also on that 7th floor were portraits of every previous Secretary of State. And as we were walking out, President Trump and Vice President Pence were both there to swear me in. As we were walking out, my son was reading the names on the portraits. And Nick said, Jefferson, Webster, Madison, Pompeo. I don't think so. Kids will keep you humble too. The truth is, you're never going to be James Madison. You're never going to be Thomas Jefferson. But we can all be inspired by him. And every day I was. In the same way that I'm inspired by what I see happening here at this amazing place, the Ashbrook Center. Mrs. Ashbrook, thank you. Bless you. Thank you to all of you who have been a part of underwriting, supporting, encouraging, praying for this place. You make America better. You build the America that is indeed worth fighting for. Godspeed. Good luck to all of you students. May you, much like a young Caitlin Poling who graduated from here and came to work in my congressional office, much like Mrs. Heinrichs who is doing the Lord's work, helping defend our nation, may you young people get to be a part of this noble task of serving this most exceptional of nations. Thank you, and may God bless you all. Thank you. Thank you all. Very kind. Thank you. All right.
Mr. Secretary, you mentioned that you we take a few questions, and we've got some really great questions here from folks.
I hope these questions are good. I was with the young people earlier today. They asked me really hard questions. I think I went like 7 for 9.
That's pretty good.
That's not bad. That's a high B. I'll take it.
Here's one question from our audience, and they want to know about your time at West Point. And what did your time at West Point and in the United States Army teach you that has shaped your life?
Oh, goodness. So many things. I was so blessed to get into that place. I know there's some Naval Academy grads here. West Point is the finest leadership institution in America. The truth is, it taught me so much. It taught me how to build teams, right? The importance of organizational excellence, striving for it every day. It taught me, right? The motto is duty, honor, country. It taught me, or reminded me, maybe it was my mother who taught me, you got to work hard and tell the truth. It was also a place, maybe the purest meritocracy that I've ever been around. Nobody knew who came from where. There were kids from Appalachia. There were kids like me neither whose parents graduated from college. There were kids whose parents were wealthy. None of it mattered. We showed up. We all got the same uniforms, the same rifle, and the same Federalist Papers. And they did a pretty good job of teaching us that we should value individuals and excellence, and we should reward that every day. And lastly, they reminded me, there was a guy 2 years ahead of me. He said, Cadet Pompeo, I have seen lazy, successful people, but not very many. And reminded me our obligation to continue to serve and to work in ways that I think so many of you here tonight understand too.
Here's a very specific question, but a very interesting one, I think, on American foreign policy and the current situation in the world. The person wants to know, what are your thoughts on the uprising in Iran that's happening now?
So I'm rooting for the Iranian people. It's hard to know. My first assignment as a young soldier was patrolling the East German border. I was there from 1986 in the summer till October of 1989. So every day we would drive our M1 tanks and our Jeeps up and down the road. Best job. I mean, that was a great assignment for a 22-year-old kid. I know every good beer place in Bayreuth. But when I left, had no idea that East Germany was about to collapse. And I left less than 2 weeks before. In the same way, you can't predict when the regime in Iran and its tyranny, its horrific desire to wipe the nation of Israel off the face of the earth. We don't know when it ends, but we know it will end by the people of Iran rising up. And so I regret that the current administration is underwriting the Ayatollah, not enforcing sanctions, giving them money with which to torment their own people, put the Gulf states and Israel at risk, and change the lives of Americans here at home too. So I pray that we will go back to a model that says the regime is bad and evil, and the United States isn't going to talk to them, negotiate with them, give them money. And when we do, we enable the Iranian people to have that prayer that they seek, which is liberty and freedom for themselves, to govern themselves.
You mentioned some of this, but a questioner wants to follow up and ask you, what do you think is the greatest threat to America today? Is it the Chinese Communist government?
Yeah, so the greatest threat from outside the country is the Chinese Communist Party. It's unfortunately, it's not even a close call. They have a set of capabilities and an intention that wants to undermine the way we live, and they are the only external power today that can actually deliver on that. And so that requires us to do a lot of hard work. Probably the thing I'm, at the macro level, the thing I'm most proud of my time was to convince the entire Trump administration to get on board to take this on. We were pushing back against a lot of history. For 45 years, this is not remotely political, for 45 years, Democrats and Republicans alike's theory of the case was engage more and they'll become more like us. And whatever it might have made sense in 1972 or 1982, by 2022 it didn't make any sense. And so we now have a tall mountain to climb. This problem set is more difficult than the defeat of the Soviet Union. will require more from America than the defeat of the Soviet Union did, and I am convinced we will pull it off faster than we defeated the Soviet Union, not because of folks in Washington, but because the American people have had just about enough of them stealing tens of thousands of jobs from Ohioans and surviving on the back of the American people.
Of course, you were, in your time as director of CIA, you got to know many of the folks the men and women who serve the United States in the CIA. Their work, of course, is often shrouded in secrecy, and the public doesn't know them or the great work they do. Tell us your thoughts, your impression of the men and women of the CIA.
Yeah. So I joked with the young people tonight that when I became CIA director, my son said two things to me. He said, "Okay, it's true, you're finally cool." And second, he said, "Dad, you got to go read the UFO files." So as any good father, I did read them. And as I told the kids tonight, I can only tell you that we have bigger problems. My time at the CIA was glorious. I took over from John Brennan, who had politicized the place in ways that were deeply dangerous. And I, much like I talked about taking America back to its founding ideas, I took the CIA back to its founding ideas. The notion of Wild Bill Donovan and the OSS, to work with the law and to deliver, to actually conduct espionage that would benefit you all, and the officers, the spies, the people who really loved the great things that the CIA has historically done, loved me for it. And I say that because it's not about me, but we gave them the opportunity to go take risk and deliver on behalf of the American people. It was a great gig. You get to travel the world, and there's no media around, so it was lovely. Not true when you're the Secretary of State. But there are bad apples in every organization, and the political leadership that was there before me was at risk of taking this incredible jewel, this incredibly important tool that has served America so well, and destroying it. And we began to put it on the right path. My success for a woman named Gina Haspel continued it. And frankly, of all the leaders in this administration, the current director there, Bill Burns, and maybe this is a low bar in my eyes, but in any event, I'm happy that he has kept some of the things that we were doing in place. And you all need, I know it's much maligned, I even see it on Fox News, I know the CIA is much maligned. Know that the young men and women that are working there are amazing patriots.
A questioner wants to know about American energy independence. What are your thoughts on the importance of it and how we can achieve it?
My blood pressure's going up. So as America's Secretary of State, you want to use every ounce of American power you possibly can. One of the most important tools in my toolkit was the fact that America was not only energy independent, but energy dominant. And we could deliver that energy reliably to friends and partners all across the world in ways that made them want to be our friends. And so we did it. I say we did it. We empowered the private sector to go do it in places like Ohio, where you have fracking, right? And you have amazing companies that are building the infrastructure, the pipelines, the great company that builds gas compressors, right? For 30 years, Europe lived in a green fantasy. And we can all have our views on climate change, but at the end of the day, Europeans are going to die this winter because of political choices that were made to say, well, no, we're going to get rid of our coal, we're going to get rid of our nuclear, we're going to get rid of fossil fuels, we're going to count on the Russians to deliver us our natural gas through a single pipeline band, and now Europeans are going to die. We have made the same mistake here in the United States. We have alienated our friends in the Middle East that were prepared to help and support when times were tough. We've now destroyed the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. We're about to do the same thing in diesel. We're going to have a very difficult, expensive winter here in the United States as well, and all of that by choice. All of that because of a set of decisions that political leaders made. I'm from Kansas. Tornadoes happen, but there was no reason to put America in this position. And the people who will suffer the most will be the families that can afford it the least. And so I pray that we get back there, that we forget the silliness of the ESG rules, we get capital back investing, and then America can take that abundant natural gas, clean energy that we can produce and only we can produce for the world, and we will be more prosperous and we will be a heck of a lot safer here as well.
Mr. Secretary, this is a political question, but it only has one word on the card, and it just says 2024 question mark.
That's not political. That's when we're going to be back energy independent. That's the year. Look, I get asked about this from time to time. It's no secret. I've spent a fair amount of time in Iowa the last couple months, in New Hampshire and South Carolina. Not random. But the truth is, Susan and me, my wife and I haven't made a decision about what we're going to do. We are thinking about whether this is the right place, whether the Lord is put us there and thinks that we would be the right people, that I would be the right person to make the case, to be the President of the United States. I've been close to it. It is an incredible task and requires men and women of real character and strength and audacity. We will keep working our way through it. We will, by beginning of next year, sort our way through and pray, and we'll make a decision. And you'll know quick, because I'll either be back to my real life or I'll own a small apartment in Des Moines. Anyway, keep praying for us as we work our way through it. Thanks.
The person says you mentioned the importance to you of your Christian faith, and they wanted to know what is your favorite Bible verse or person in the Bible, if you have one?
Oh my gosh, so many. My favorite story is one I taught my fifth graders, or our fifth graders, Susan and mine. We told the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. There were many a days that I was pretty sure I was in the fire. And every one of those days, I was out of the fire in the same way that they were. I was out of the fire because the good Lord was watching over what it was I was doing. And I prayed every time. You know, when you occupy these roles, when you wake up every morning, there is bad news. And then I got to counter that because I would, sitting on my desk, have open the good news in the Bible. And I would read that thick packet of material, and I would always just take a moment, sometimes just to read a verse or so. But I would remind myself of this story where the Lord saved these three men because they were faithful. And so I love that story because, we all get it wrong. I am deeply imperfect. My wife describes me as an authentic Christian. Those who work for me know I every now and again use an adult word, and I didn't do it tonight, so I'm pretty good so far. But it reminded me, and that story from the Bible reminded me of the responsibility you have to things that are bigger than you, to things that are, in fact, eternal. And I love this country, and it has been watched over by Him, but it's, in fact, the Lord that's driving all of these outcomes. So anything that I say, boy, I'm proud of, or I did, I'm reminded that it wasn't really me. It was something much bigger than me. Yeah, sure.
Someone here writes that the Trump administration doesn't seem to get very much credit for the amazing peace accords that happened in the Middle East. Can you talk about those and the importance of those?
Yeah, not the credit part. History is still being written. I think it was important. I think it was important as a Christian. Jerusalem is a really important place. So that was part of our understanding, and the fact that the president made an incredible decision to move our embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem was bold, and 4 presidents before him had punted on it in spite of having promised the American people they would do it. And that, along with 4 or 5 other things that we did, enabled what became these 4 peace agreements between nations that it's hard to imagine, right? They didn't have airline flights between these countries. People couldn't speak to each other. They wouldn't play each other in sports, right? Just crazy stuff. And we were able to build out that prosperity and that peace. For me, it mattered as a Christian, but it also mattered as a soldier, because we have sent an awful lot of our kids to fight and die in that Middle East for a long time. And to the extent we can reduce the risk that we have to do that matters. And that means prosperity and stability in the region. So we had three pillars. I wish I could tell you we had written this down, strategized, and then executed. The truth is, it came together. It came together around the idea of Israel's a friend and partner. We're going to defend it. So whether it was announcing the move of the embassy or the rightful place of the Jewish people in their homeland to have the Golan Heights, I traveled to Judea and Samaria and made clear the Israelis weren't occupiers. In fact, there was a wine named after me. It's called Pompeo wine. You can go get it. It's pretty good, actually, for Israeli wine. And they've sold a lot. The Israeli winery that did it has sold a lot because it's got an Italian name on it. So everybody thinks it's Italian, not Israeli. But the world knew that we were going to defend our friends there. And then second, we knew Iran was the problem child. They were foisting terror around the world. They're the largest state sponsor of terror. They were making life miserable for their own people. And so we put enormous pressure on them. And when we did that, the Gulf Arab states, the Muslim states in the Gulf, all said, we can count on Trump and Pompeo. If things go bad, if we recognize Israel and there is violence in the streets, the Trump administration will be with us. And we enabled that. And the Lord put some remarkable people in place, the Crown Prince in the Emirates, the Crown Prince in Saudi Arabia, Prime Minister Netanyahu, the Crown Prince in Bahrain, put some amazing leaders in place for that moment who said, enough of a crazy foreign policy that has as its centerpiece the destruction of the nation of Israel. And the people in the region are better off today. I pray that it will continue, and it will only do so with real American leadership.
One last question, because it's Ashbrook. We always like to ask this of our guests. Who is your favorite person in U.S. history?
Yeah, I answered this a little bit earlier, too. So it'd be easy to say Reagan. And
That's not a wrong answer.
And I love him. I love him and admire him and hope that our model in the Trump administration reflected his understanding of America's place and role in the world. But I think perhaps my favorite is George Washington, a political leader, a military leader who chose a moment to say, nope, I don't want to rule. I want America to be governed. I told Jeff a bit earlier, I just finished what's really a biography of his wife, Martha. And I read it alongside, my wife read the same book at the same time when we read it, and you recognize how much his family sacrificed, how much both of them were serving our country. When I was in Congress, or even when my time as CI Director, Secretary of State, when I was done, I got on a plane and I could get home, and I could be back with my wife or with my son. For President Washington, right, that wasn't going to happen. And they were both such deep, deep patriots that they risked everything. They risked everything they had for America, and he led both soldiers and a nation towards separating from tyranny. I can't think of a better epitaph for someone to have. So I'm going to go with George tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. Great. Thank you all so much.